History remembers its queens for their dazzling crowns, their political maneuvering, and the power they wielded. But what of the silent, personal battles fought away from the public eye? In this story, we delve into the untold sacrifices of some of history's most famous royal women, exploring how the immense pressure to produce an heir shaped their lives, their bodies, and their reigns. If you're fascinated by the hidden narratives that history often overlooks, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell for more stories like this. History is often written in the ink of battles, treaties, and glorious reigns. But behind the velvet curtains of power, in the cold stone corridors of palaces, lies another history, a poignant epic rarely told. It is the story of the women who wore the crown, the queens whose destinies and worth were often measured not by their intellect or statecraft, but by their ability to produce heirs. For them, the glory of the throne was inextricably linked to the burden of the womb, and the sacred role of motherhood was twisted into a ruthless political duty, a lifelong sacrifice. First, we journey into the stark physical reality faced by these royal women. For many, their bodies were not their own, but vessels for the dynasty's future, enduring a relentless physical toll as they were tasked with securing the line of succession. For many queens, their own bodies ceased to be their own. They became territory belonging to the state, a vital instrument for preserving the future of an entire dynasty. Imagine Maria Theresa of Austria, the powerful empress, bent over a military map, directing her generals with one hand while supporting her heavily pregnant belly with the other. She carried not just a child, but the very fate of the Habsburg Empire. For 18 years, her body endured 16 births, making her an extraordinary symbol of endurance. A figure in whom supreme power and physical bondage coexisted in a profound paradox. In England, Queen Charlotte faced a similar race against time. With 15 children in 21 years, her life was a long series of expectations and pressures. With each passing month, the court held its breath for news, and the whispers in the palace halls turned her fertility into a public scoreboard. She was not merely having children, she was performing a strategic mission, providing heirs and spares to ensure the throne would never be left vacant. But perhaps no tragedy is more tangible than the story of Mumtaz Mahal of the Mughal Empire. Her love for Emperor Shah Jahan became the stuff of legend, immortalized in the white marble of the Taj Mahal. But that very love was also her cruel destiny. Her 19 years of marriage were marked by 14 pregnancies. The last one, after 30 hours of agonizing labor, took her life. Her death reveals a harsh truth. No matter how beloved or revered, a queen's fundamental role was reproduction, and sometimes the price was her own life. Beyond the physical ordeal, an invisible war was waged within the minds of these royal women. This section explores the silent psychological battle against the crushing pressure of infertility or the failure to produce the desired male heir. If constant childbirth was a form of physical torture, the silence in the royal bedchamber was a psychological torment of even greater magnitude. Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, spent the first decade of her marriage living as a shadow. That decade was a sequence of torment, desperate prayers, and terrifying medical treatments, all for the sake of conceiving a child. She had to endure the scorn of the court and the coldness of her king, who openly favored his mistress. Therefore, when she finally gave birth to her first child, it was not just the joy of a mother, but a political victory, an affirmation of a status that had once been perilously fragile. Across the English Channel, Queen Anne suffered a different kind of tragedy, the tragedy of repeated loss. 17 pregnancies, 17 moments of hope for the kingdom, and 17 descents into despair. Each loss was not just a private, soul-shattering grief for a mother, but a national crisis that shook the future of the Stuart dynasty. She was trapped in a vicious cycle of physical pain and mental anguish, while the world looked upon her as a failure in her duty. The act of childbirth was often deeply intertwined with a queen's political power and personal freedom. Here we see how this created a complex paradox, where a queen could be both ruler and prisoner, mother and pawn. The lives of some queens were a complex symphony of power, reproductive duty, and personal freedom. Eleanor of Aquitaine is a prime example. She was a wealthy and powerful duchess in her own right, the queen of both France and England. She gave birth to future kings, yet these very children became pawns in her power struggle with her husband, King Henry II, who imprisoned her for 16 years. It is a stark irony that she was both the source of the dynasty's strength and a prisoner in the very kingdom her sons would rule. Centuries later, Queen Victoria, the most powerful woman in the world at the time, also faced her own internal conflict. In her private journals, she frankly admitted her dislike for pregnancy and her struggles with postpartum depression. In the midst of a restrictive Victorian society, she felt powerless over her own body and emotions. This reveals that even at the apex of power, a woman could still be imprisoned by biological constraints and societal expectations. Finally, we look beyond the confines of their reproductive roles to recognize their true, enduring legacy. Their stories compel us to see them not as victims of fate, but as resilient and intelligent figures who forged their own influence despite the immense pressures they faced. When we look back at lives like that of Isabella of Valois, a child bride who died at 20 after her third birth, or Constance of Castile, who lived and died under the weight of needing to produce a son, we see clearly how cruelly the value of a royal woman was framed. However, to see them merely as victims of fate would be a disservice. The true legacy of these women lies not only in the children they brought into the world. Their greatest legacy is found in the resilience, intellect, and influence they wielded in spite of those shackles. By ruling, negotiating, patronizing the arts, and shaping policy, often while pregnant or recovering from childbirth, they redefined the very nature of female power. They proved that a queen's strength came not just from her womb, but from her mind and her will. Their stories are a powerful testament that behind every royal bloodline lie untold sacrifices and the extraordinary strength of the women who made history in their own right.